Okay, lots of good stuff there. Thanks very much, Rob. I was just trying to play this video clip. I think I've managed to fix it now, hopefully. Let's just see if this will go. Come on, go. There we go. Yeah, so this is some of the clips that I got from the tracker. Let's get rid of the mouse. Now, I'd like you to watch this clip because you can see the time in the top left here. Exactly noon, this cloud front clears. This is from Leeds, centre of Leeds. And what can you see? You can see this band of cloud. It stays here for about 2 hours. And then above that, there's another band of cloud higher up. It's a fixed set of cloud. This cloud is being held in position. So I think, I'll stick my neck out and say this, what you've seen there is evidence of weather control, weather modification. And I've got probably a few examples of this. This is the video from Warrington, where you've got grids. This is 25th of November last year. Of course, this is all automated. As I say, I've got this on my brother's house, pointing out the bedroom window, and I picked up all these grids. Look at all these lines. This is real data. This is real observations, right? And I was able to go back to those charts as I showed you. This is all on the DVD that I've got. And there's non-persistent trails. And then the persistent trails come back. So we've got this mixture. There are no answers to this that I know of. And I've got lots of these videos. In fact, I've got about 3 months worth, probably 4 months worth I haven't even looked at yet. This is the power of being able to develop your own software and the open source software that you can get for nothing. That's the no trails there. This is that whole day. And then that one I was able to work out which flight that was. And then this one is interesting from Cirencester. This is one of the other trackers. And what you'll see, what happens here, trail, 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 and then look what happens. More trails. And this spreads out into a blanket of cloud and drifts over here. So why did these trails spread out and then you get cloud? I think it's just going to go in a loop now, yeah. So that was the video I was trying to show you. And I've probably got more of that to come, but I just haven't had time to look at it all. So now we're going to go and talk about what's allegedly in these trails. Again, it's a bit of a mystery. I was talking about this to Rob before we came, but we've got this climatologist called Dr. David Keith. Now, he has put forward this idea of what's called solar radiation management. It's all on the back of the global warming hoax, global warming scam, which therefore allows you to develop solutions to cool the planet because it's warming up. One of which is to have these levitating discs of aluminium oxide, and barium titanate, right? And these will levitate in the atmosphere, according to Keith, when they're of a certain size due to the electric field that's generated within the atmosphere. And this would then allow you to reflect light back into space and you cool the planet. That's the basic idea behind it. And David Keith talked about this on a program with I forget his name now, Colbert, in the US, the Colbert show. So some people are saying that this is evidence that that's what's happening. We've got these barium and aluminium and discs, like as in Keith's peer-reviewed paper, being sprayed in the atmosphere, right? And as you heard in the news clip, and other people have said this, some tests of water and soil samples seem to show elevated levels of these barium and aluminium compounds. But it seems to be isolated. And both these compounds can adversely affect human health. Aluminium's been linked to Alzheimer's. And barium, well, you have a barium meal, for example, and that's radio opaque. So that's why it shows up on an X-ray. But genuinely proving that the source of barium and aluminium in the water supply and so on is from chemtrails, that's more difficult. Authorities will deny the existence of chemtrails, so they won't even take you seriously. Other people say that erythrocytes have been found in some chemtrails. These are like red blood cells. It's a biological component, allegedly, according to some of Carnicom's experiments and tests. So what are chemtrails for? Well, again, if you read stuff on the internet, weather control. They're used for weather control. I actually come to think they're actually a side effect of weather control, but I'll come to that maybe in a bit. they're meant to make us just ill. They're not meant to, sorry, they're meant to for immunosuppression. So they suppress your immune system. You know, you load it up with metals, so you're less resistant to disease, so they can sell you more pharmaceuticals, possibly. Covert biowarfare, they're just trying to kill us all off. But I don't think it's a very efficient way to kill us all off. Frankly, there would be much simpler ways, like just, you know, setting off a nuclear bomb. That would be much better warfare if they want to kill us all off. Or overt biowarfare, because it's so obvious. But I do not think in any way, shape or form that what we see as chemtrails is to prevent or change the effect of global warming. And it is an international program. It's going on in most countries of the world. Now, somebody at the interval asked a very good question to which I didn't know the answer. Is it happening over Russia? And I just thought then I've not seen any pictures or video that I know from Russia of chemtrails, or what's called chemtrails. There could be, but I'm currently not aware of it, so that's a very interesting question. Clifford Carnicom's talked about geoengineering. Yeah, this is just expanding on what I said. Military purposes. Are they used for some type of military technology which enables a propulsion system to change the electromagnetic properties of the atmosphere? That's a possibility. I don't really know. This is what other people have suggested. The other mysterious thing, I'm not going to play these clips because I'm short on time, is fibres. People have actually recorded fibres falling from the sky. Now, I know at least in a few cases these are indeed cobwebs. And again, there's disinformation about this, and people have talked about these fibres causing something called Morgellons disease. But again, linking this to the substance in chemtrails, well, I'm not sure. William Thomas tells the story of seeing a police officer covered in spiders' webs. You can see them clearly on his uniform. Other tales, even in the news clip, there was allegedly gunk falling from the sky. But these cases seem fairly isolated. You don't see them a lot. I had somebody sent me a picture of some fibres once, a video that they'd made, and he said, "Oh, you can clearly see these fibres, Andrew." I couldn't see them. They said it was taken under a microscope. I couldn't see any fibres. So I'm not sure about the fibres. I'm not really sure what's in chemtrails. One thing that we have to consider is we've basically got two modes of delivery of whatever compounds. One is that the compounds are mixed in with the fuel. That presents a problem because, as people in the room should know, jet engines are finely tuned pieces of engineering, right? So if you introduce any impurities in the fuel, that's going to impact the performance. You're going to get residue build-up on the components, and you're going to have to take the engine out of service. So to put this as a fuel additive, is that really going to work? I'm not convinced it would. So then you're left with, well, the aircraft have got to have a separate spraying system. They've got to have separate nozzles, with stuff spraying out. We seem to have a few instances where people have photographed that, but the information is very, very hard to get hold of in terms of something definite. I'll mention that a bit more in a few minutes. Now, but we're definitely getting disinformation put out. I've seen several instances of this. We've seen two people quite recently, A.C. Griffith and Kristen Megan, I keep getting her name wrong. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any genuine, knowledgeable whistleblowers who are talking knowledgeably about aircraft mechanics and so forth, and they don't have, videos from inside the aircraft. None of these people have inside information which I would consider verifiable and solid and accurate in terms of scientifically accurate. They make reference to documents such as owning the weather by 2025. That's one that comes up a lot. They'll talk about HARP and stuff like that. But when you actually get down to the nitty-gritty, they don't really seem to have any other information than what's already on the internet. Particularly this guy. He got a lot of coverage a few years ago. He's dead now, apparently. He did this whole Power Hour interview, which went right around the internet. But there wasn't any information in that interview that I didn't already know about. That guy didn't convince me he was an insider. He had no new information, even though he claimed that he got inside this chemtrail program. No, he hadn't. You can go and listen to it. Now then, Ted Tweitmeyer, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He said, look, this is a spray pod. Look, chemtrails are real, folks. This is a spray pod. This was on his website. There's the link. This was in, 2008, I think. Oops. No, it's not a spray pod. It's actually either a refueling pod or a smoke generator from an aircraft. Clearly. And it's easy to find that out. You know, you just go onto some of these aircraft enthusiast websites, you can find that. That's not a spraying pod. You don't see that on the planes that go over your head if you zoom into them. It's just a refueling pod. Oh my God, we're inside a chemtrail aircraft. This is a chemtrail. Look, these tanks are all where they keep all the chemicals in, folks. This went right around the internet. Sorry, this is a test aircraft. And what they do is they pump this fluid around these tanks to distribute the load in the airframe to test the aircraft and see how it performs with different airframe load. It's fairly easy to flight test control. They are data logging, telemetry, multiplexing. But somebody had put that out and said that it was inside a chemtrail in an aircraft. No, it wasn't. It's just an aircraft test. And they should have known that. But that went round the internet, round and round and round. Oh, we've got proof now, everyone. We've proved we've been sprayed by toxic chemicals. Well, again, that's not necessarily true. You might have pictures of the tanks, but you don't know what's in them, so you can't say whether it's toxic. Here's another picture. This is from a Boeing test. If you go onto that page there, they'll tell you about that whole day of testing where they took a set of Boeing employees up, and you can see them walking around in the aircraft, and here's the tanks. This is disinformation. This is how it works. You convince people they're being sprayed with toxic chemicals, and they'll basically, swallow anything you give them. Now then, let's see if I play this clip.
With the whole 9/11 issue from bottom to top, again, there is really nothing that supports the official story, and everything supports the conclusions that your group, and again, how could you have a stronger group than that? 2,200 people, and I know there's a lot of disinformation. We talked about this off the air. A lot of people that want to grab at straws, and they grab it. I've seen the laser beams from space and all this sort of stuff that is simply designed to make people reject the actual facts. We see the climate engineering when you have people trying sorts of fringe things into the subject to cloud the issue, the disinformation. But in this case, when you have 2,200 plus architects and engineers signing their credibility, how could you have any more weight than that? And so I hope people that have heard lots of other peripheral that have confused them, look at 9/11 A&E. That's the nuts and bolts facts that really cannot be argued with in any way, shape, or form. So on this, Richard, I know that some of these other theories that appear to have been thrown out there for this clouding the issue, right? But they're not really making much progress with that. I mean, I think you guys have really gained the lion's share of credibility and attention.
Well, I think so, and that's because we're looking at it scientifically. Regarding Judy Wood and her theory of directed energy weapons, what she does is look at the site around the towers and tries to find unusual evidence to try to support an unusual theory. That she doesn't even know what evidence would support that theory, because we don't know anything about directed energy weapons or how they work. We don't even know if they exist. We know they're experimental programs. But in the process, what Judy Wood does is deny the scientific forensic evidence that we do have for nanothermite, which we haven't even discussed yet on this call, but it's small red gray chips of high-tech nano by an international team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen, which nanothermite should not be found in the World Trade Center dust, and there's tons of it. I mean, literally tons of it. We'll get to that, but she also denies the evidence. Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead. She also denies the evidence for explosives going off, which are heard by hundreds of people, including documented orally by 118 first responders. And she denies the evidence for hot, molten temperatures exceeding 2,800 degrees. Officials with satellite infrared technology have documented very well in the piles underneath World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7. So we're about to.
we're just about to run out of time, but I want to summarize with this, to finish with what you just said, to summarize it. Bottom line is we have one person, Dr. Judy Wood, ignoring evidence and disputing literally not just 2,200 experts, but many more when you count all these other first responders that heard the explosion. So we have one person denying who knows how many, 2,500, 3,000 experts from various fields. Which would people be reasonable in believing? Obviously, you guys are standing on solid ground, period. Nobody else is. So as we wrap up the show, we're about to lose our time. Richard, I hope everybody goes to your site. Please help us sound the alarm on your cause. Every day matters. These are the two most important issues on the planet, I believe, climate engineering and 9/11. So I hope everybody pulls together from these two camps. Richard, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dane and Russ and Greg.
Thank you, Richard, for being with us. This is Geoengineering Watch Radio. We're here every Saturday at noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time at ucy.tv. We'll see you next week.
So I think you got the gist of that. Now, I didn't really explain. I put this bit together fairly hastily before I come to do this presentation. This guy, Dane Wigington, anybody know which site he runs? Website? Anybody know? Well, guess what? He runs a website called geoengineeringwatch.com. All right? How many people in this room know about Hurricane Erin on 9/11 and the movements of it in the days before and after? Few people know it because I've been here. Dane Wigington, who runs Geoengineering Watch, will not talk about some of the best evidence available for geoengineering, which happened in the days before and after 9/11. Instead, he promotes lies, yes, outright lies. This man has been going around doing 30-day tours, putting out to the American public about explosives. They lie about what's in that book on that table. If you take the contents page of that book, right, you'll find evidence for explosives discussed, evidence for thermite discussed. He claims, and Wigington allows him to claim, that Judy Wood doesn't talk about that. Sorry, you guys, you're lying. You're both complete and utter liars because it's in that book, right? And I have a copy of a cheque signed by Richard Gage where he bought that book, right? So he should know what's in it. Yet he's going around claiming about that book, about 9/11, that things are not in that book, which are in that book. This guy is a liar. This guy is a liar. They're two liars working together on two separate cover-ups, right? That's how this thing works. The interconnected groups of liars about most of these things that people talk about here. And I could go into a lot more detail, but we're short on time. And I'll show you the Hurricane Erin stuff in a bit. Chemtrails are normal, folks, though. They really are. Audio on this. A bit loud.
I never thought we'd ever get so near to a train as this.
It's better than toy engines, isn't it?
Don't know. It's different. It seems so odd to see all of a train. It's so tall. I've always seen it cut in half by...
It was like a great dragon tearing by.
Better than the hotel. I could probably keep the menu as a souvenir.
A pot of tea for two things. Make absolutely sure that the water is really boiling.
Certainly, madam. The moment I meet an attractive woman, I have to start pretending I've no desire to make love to her.
What makes you think you have to conceal it?
How do they walk in these things, huh? Will you quit stalling? We're gonna miss the train.
get on. I'm so sorry. You should always tell a honeymoon couple, you know. They're so shy.
Beats flying, doesn't it? Beats flying, doesn't it?
So there you go. And Phil Morris, the chap I mentioned earlier, he actually found out who made that commercial, and he wrote to them, and they admitted that they deliberately added it to modernise that image. Yeah. The chemtrails were indeed on purpose in our Virgin Trains Return of the Train ad. If you look closely in the background, you can also see a block of modern flats on the horizon. This juxtaposition of old and new aims to highlight the new beginnings of the modern Virgin train. So, hang on a minute, these nice modern things, why are you going to put a form of pollution in your commercial, which is the chemtrail? Why don't you put something else, like just the jet aircraft, flying at low altitude or something? And with a Virgin logo on it, because of course Virgin Airlines, Virgin trains. No, they've got to put a chemtrail in. And they put them in kids' films. Over the Hedge, 2006, DreamWorks animation, all completely CGI, no live action at all generated inside a computer. Let's put in the sky some nice fluffy clouds, shall we? Dreamlike clouds. Oh no, aircraft trails. And there are other films as well. And then it gets worse. Everything's normal, folks. Wimbledon, the pinnacle of English summer culture. Strawberries, green grass. Not one shot of the sky. Every single shot of the sky had trails in it. Every single shot. And that was reused this year as well. So, they're trying to normalise it, and you can see this in advertising as well if you keep an eye out. There are other examples. There's a Specsavers ad which was particularly bad. Don't Talk About the Weather has got some more examples. So I'm going to talk a bit about geoengineering. Charles Hatfield, he made rain 100 years ago almost, 1915. And it was used for the film The Rainmaker, Burt Lancaster in 1956. The story goes that basically there was a drought. Charles Hatfield said he could produce rain. They gave him, some money. He built a 20-foot tower, and they released some chemicals, and then it rained for 15 days non-stop, and they blamed him for the damage, caused dams to burst and stuff, allegedly. Now, of course, the thing that you'll hear about is cloud seeding. This was invented by Irving Langmuir, 1946. He put he seeded a cloud with crushed dry ice, and snow began falling out of that cloud. And then Bernard Vonnegut is credited with discovering the potential of silver iodide used in cloud seeding. This property is related to a good match in the lattice constant between the two types of crystal, between ice crystals and silver iodide crystals. That's mainly used for hail suppression. And there's also hygroscopic seeding. It's used for the enhancement of rainfall in warm clouds. And cloud seeding was allegedly used, or was used, in Project Popeye, to flood out the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the Vietnam War. So those are all pretty well disclosed, well known about techniques and so forth. Small-scale projects have allegedly been carried out, but I don't have all the details. There's some with little or no secrecy. Rosalind Peterson sent me a lot of these documents. And there's the thing at Linemouth, which happened in the 50s. And there's also the suggestion of Edward Teller to make a global sunscreen by putting sulphurous compounds in the upper atmosphere. That was talked about in the 70s or the 80s. And then Project Storm Fury. Ben Livingston. This is another disclosed project of geoengineering, carried out between 1962 and 1983. They actually put seeding around hurricanes, and they were able to reduce hurricane damage. They measured this, and they were able to get this to work. I've got a clip here, I'm going to pass through it though. He basically says at the end of the clip, they got the hurricane seeding to work, they knew where to fly, they could seed the clouds around the hurricane and reduce the wind speed and take the amount of damage that was done down, and he said it was a successful project, but Congress wouldn't fund it. And I think that's probably true, because they wanted the properties to be damaged so that they could, the insurance companies could make loads of money and stuff like that from all the insurance and stuff like that. Legislation or officials mentioning weather control and modification. There was a brief mention of that in the news clip I played earlier. But before that, well, I came across this. This was Max Bliss that found this. I didn't believe it at first.
And as we extend the rule of law on earth, so must we also extend it to man's new domain, outer space. All of us salute the brave cosmonauts of the Soviet Union. The new horizons of outer space must not be riven by the old bitter concepts of imperialism and sovereign claims. The cold reaches of the universe must not become the new arena of an even colder war. To this end, we shall urge proposals extending the United Nations Charter to the limits of man's exploration in the universe, reserving outer space for peaceful use, prohibiting weapons of mass destruction in space or on celestial bodies, and opening the mysteries and benefits of space to every nation. We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. We shall propose, finally, a global systems of communication satellites linking the whole world in telegraph and telephone and radio and television. The day need not be far away when such a system will televise the proceedings of this body to every corner of the world for the benefit of peace. We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
I only came across that very recently. This is quite well known on the internet. HR 2977. This was about a bill that was put before Congress on the 2nd of October 2001 by Denis Kucinich. He's a bit of an unusual character, is Kucinich, if you find out a bit more about him. And the first draft of this bill actually said it defines some of the types of weapons which should be included in a ban on space-based weapons, including exotic weapons such as electronic, psychotronic or information weapons, chemtrails, high-altitude, ultra-low frequency weapon systems, plasma, electromagnetic, sonic or ultrasonic weapons, laser weapon systems, strategic theatre, tactical or extraterrestrial weapons, and chemical, biological, environmental, climate or tectonic weapons. That was all mentioned in that bill, but that was only in the first draft, and then in the later drafts apparently they took it out. And then this was mentioned in the news broadcast. This was Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison's bill. It is the purpose of this act to develop and implement a comprehensive and coordinated national weather modification policy and a national cooperative federal and state program of weather modification research and development. and that I think was in 2005. So it has been talked about. And then there was a convention, I think in 1976, on these issues, environmental modification. I'm not going to go through all of that. But we saw very briefly this in the news clip, and I found that I didn't see it myself originally. But this, excuse me, this is the ideal, geoengineering scenario put forward by Stanford University. You've got your aerosols in the stratosphere, giant reflectors in orbit, chemicals to save ozone, cloud seeding, genetically engineered crops, greening deserts. You've got pumped liquid CO2 deep into the sea, and you've got iron fertilization of the sea. Wow. Do we really want to do all that? Well, Stanford University does. Wow. It's quite a thing to behold, isn't it? It's all on their website. The world's slow progress in cutting carbon emissions and the looming danger that the climate could take a sudden turn for the worse require policymakers to take a closer look at emergency strategies for curbing the effects of global warming. That's from the geoengineering option. Oh, really? They're already doing it. And here we have the UK Parliament, regulation of geoengineering, 10th of March 2010. When do you hear about this on BBC News? Oh no, just put crap stuff about Ebola. It's going to kill us all. I won't tell you about this. The regulation of geoengineering, it's the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee. I went to one of these conferences. I went to this one in 2009. Geoengineering, taking control of our planet's climate. I warned the panel of scientists there about what Eisenhower said about the military-industrial complex and as being the victims of a scientific technological elite. Those people at the Royal Society are the scientific technological elite, and they're being encouraged to do conferences like this, Next Steps in Climate Science, Warm Climates of the Past, A Lesson for the Future. We've had 3 of them, public conferences. And then ClimateGate, the Hadley CRU science fraud in 2010, where they released all these emails. One of them said, I've just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real temperatures to each series for the last 20 years, i.e. from 1981 onwards, and from 1961 for Keith, to hide the decline in global temperature, that is. So they were actively talking about massaging the data to show what they wanted. This was all in the papers and everything. Yet we still have to pay carbon taxes. You still go onto Enterprise Rental Car website and you can carbon offset, pay a fee to offset your carbon emissions. It's in the legislation, it's there now, it's all there. But it's all a complete hoax and a scam, all of it. Now, I've already shown you that clip I got on the time-lapse very recently. This has been going on for years. These hole punch clouds, they still have no proper explanation for these. That's from 2003. Another one, 2004. Some of these are quite old now. Yeah, right, this is a natural cloud formation, 2 trails, and this sort of strange oval-shaped formation from 2004. Yeah, perfectly natural, folks. Oh yeah, you get circles. Yeah, I see them every day. And what's this here? What's this? I mean, there's hundreds of these now. What the hell's that? I mean, these are not really chemtrails, these are what I call weather anomalies. Look at them. There's hundreds of them. What the hell is going on, folks? Yeah, the good old Cloud Appreciation Society. Yeah, perfectly natural, folks, that. You know. Oh yeah, don't worry about what's actually going on. We just need a name for that type of cloud. They've called it asperities clouds. Look at this. See if this works. This is a real time-lapse movie from last year. You watch this. Yeah, it's like look from the underneath of a fish tank. Well, it's not real time. No, this is probably, one picture every 30 seconds or something like that. Now it's just on YouTube, that. What I think is going on here is there is some type of energy system which is impinging on the atmosphere and doing this to the cloud systems, kicking them around, doing strange things. You can see the rain here. I think they can create storms basically, or at the very least manipulate them and steer them. I won't play the audio clip because again we're short on time. Here's a satellite picture from June 7th, 2004. Southern Montana, East Idaho, Northwest Montana. Look at these funny features here. What's this? It's a bloody square cloud. Yeah, you see them every day, folks, don't you? Bit of a radar trace. Oh, perfectly normal. Sudden circular rainfall blast. Just as you do. And there's hundreds of these. And they'll write it off as some kind of anomaly. I forget the name of it. I might even have it on one of the slides. They claim that they've got an explanation for this, but I'd be interested to say what it was. This looks like real data, and it doesn't look like anomalies. And you see these spikes here. And then, yeah, if you look, you'll see there's like a passage of a cloud, a linear cloud. It's quite faint, but you'll see it going anti-clockwise in this image, to sort of down from there, as if it's connected to something up here and it's sweeping backwards. And there are many instances of this. There's a guy called Dutch Synths on YouTube. Some of you might have heard of him. He's collected a lot of these over the last few years, but he won't talk about 9/11. He's got some pretty impressive videos. I haven't put any in here, because again, some of this is quite old and I haven't updated it. This is from 2007, this particular clip. But Dutch Synths, you can look at some of his videos. He's collected some of the Japanese ones, and this was a more recent one. They claim that this was, I think I've got the text for it. It's something like that, yeah. They say it's, what's the name of it? Oh, God. Anomalous propagation. They claim it's anomalous propagation, and it's some kind of effect of the radar going up at a certain altitude and being reflected and giving echoes or something. But if that was the case, then how much of this data looks almost useless. If that's all anomalies, then there's very little useful data in this whole image if it's all been damaged by this anomalous propagation. So that's my problem with that image, 10th of May, 2010.
It could be something to do with
it could be, yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. And again, it's not just in the USA. We've got from Switzerland as well. This is from Switzerland. And this raised a few eyebrows from 24th of April 2009. Australia, same type of thing, 2010. That was subject to quite a long investigation. There's a bit on Colin Andrews' site about that. There's again these radar anomalies, which to me suggests some type of energy impingement, which is affecting the radar readings. And I'm going to talk briefly about Wilhelm Reich, because I think that whatever weather modification technology is in operation is probably working on the principles that Reich talked about. He discovered this form of energy that he called Orgone. And he found this in relation to human sexuality, because he said there was this type of energy which was exchanged between people in relationships. And he came to call this like a life force energy, an orgone energy. And he was actually an assistant to Sigmund Freud, so he was looking at the more psychological side. He then constructed these orgone accumulators. I've talked about these before. And you can this has now been, people have now developed orgonite, which is like a version of what was in Reich's orgone accumulator, and you can buy these, and people put them at cell phone towers to neutralise the negative energy that comes out of cell phone towers, and they call this gifting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that here, but I encourage you to research that. And he talked about developing Cloudbusters, which he pointed at clouds, and he was able to dissipate these clouds. And I've got a clip here, because, let's see if... Yeah, and then James DeMeo, he's written a whole book about orgone energy and Cloudbusters. I can send people the PDF of that, because somebody sent that to me recently, about how you can use these orgone devices to control clouds. And Charles R. Kelly repeated this in the 1960s, and he was able to basically make some of these clouds disappear in a period of a few minutes. And then, of course, we've got this. So that's what that song was about. And Wilhelm Reich, by the way, all his books were burned. And all mention of orgone energy was expunged from the literature of the time, which was the 50s and 60s. And Wilhelm Reich ended up dead in a prison cell. And you can get a PDF of this book, but the paperbacks tend to be quite expensive. Published by written by Peter Reich, called A Book of Dreams. That's Wilhelm Reich's son. Now, I mentioned HAARP earlier on.
But there are other weather-related technologies that have a darker side. Bernard Eastland is a plasma physicist, former fusion researcher for the US Atomic Energy Commission, and inventor who has 3 weather control patents. Eastland's speciality is revolutionary mechanisms of energy transfer. That was exactly the reason that the Atlantic Richfield Oil Company approached him with a unique problem to solve.
I was originally hired by ARCO in about 1984 to find a use of their natural gas on the North Slope of Alaska. They have 23 trillion cubic feet of natural gas.
To put this in perspective, that's enough gas to power the entire American electrical grid for 1 year. But its location was so remote, there was no economically feasible way to transport it.
Dr. Eastland had been contracted with them to find a way to exploit the natural gas on the North Slope. In other words, to convert natural gas to money, but first to turn it to electricity and then radio frequency energy.
I came up with the idea of using the energy in the gas to make electricity, and to use the electricity to power a large phased array antenna that could modify the ionosphere in different ways.
Eastland's massive antenna array was called HAARP, the High Frequency Active Aural Research Project.
The claims being made about the technology were such that it was almost unbelievable.
Although the HAARP antenna array looks unremarkable, its capabilities are not. HAARP is one of the few man-made devices capable of heating the Earth's ionosphere. The ionosphere is an enveloping layer of charged particles located 145 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. The charged particles in the ionosphere perform an important function for the planet. They deflect and absorb the solar wind, the toxic onslaught of deadly particles thrown at us by the sun. Without the ionosphere, life as we know it on Earth would perish. Eastland's plan was to pump energy derived from natural gas directly into the ionosphere. The stated goal was communications research. ARCO immediately understood the genius in Eastland's idea, and thanks to his patent, they were contracted by the US military to build this incredible device.
It's a very good research facility. It's minuscule compared to the size of antenna I suggested in my patents. However, it's the first piece of what could become something bigger.
But even in its current incarnation, it's the largest ionospheric heater in the world, capable of heating a 1,000 square kilometer area of the ionosphere to over 50,000 degrees.
It's also a phased array, which means it's steerable and it can point where it wants to point. You can make those waves go where you want.
What they have found is that by sending radio frequency energy up and focusing it as they do with these kinds of instruments, it causes a heating effect. And that heating literally lifts the ionosphere within a 30-mile diameter area, therein changing localized pressure systems or perhaps the route of jet streams. The idea of moving a jet stream is a phenomenal event in terms of man being able to do this. The problem is we cannot model the system adequately.
Long-term consequences of ionospheric heating are unknown.
Changing weather in one place can have a devastating downstream effect.
And HAARP has already been accused of modifying the weather. An article in Scientific American pointed out that a strange shift in the jet stream directly over Gakona, Alaska, pushed colder air southward, causing a rare tornado outbreak in Florida. As a weapon of war, HAARP's possible uses are daunting.
Think about a 100,000-person army and your opposition, and say you could hit them with flooding rains and horrible conditions in terms of weather for several weeks, maybe months. You can degrade their ability to perform in the battlefield.
HAARP has other implications as a multi-purpose weapon. Using ionospheric manipulation, it could disrupt enemy radio and cellular communication. It could even be used to sense, differentiate, and directly destroy enemy missiles.
That's where war is headed in the 21st century. That's where these systems are headed in the 21st century.
HAARP's potential role as a secret weapon of war has long been known in military circles. Numerous countries have lodged complaints against its use, pointing to it as an obvious violation of the treaty outlawing environmental modification for weapons applications.
The last 3 secretaries of defense have all called for the elimination, the dropping of this environmental treaty. This treaty was well thought out in the early 70s, ratified by our Congress in 78. That treaty needs to stay in effect.
Through all of the controversy, HAARP scientists have maintained that the array is intended only for pure research, and that it has nowhere near the power necessary to truly change the weather. However, as the results would be classified anyway, the jury is still
about HAARP. It's basically what's called an ionospheric heater. A lot of people who talk about HAARP don't even know what the ionosphere is, and they don't know what ionospheric heater does. Well, it's meant to basically fire energy into the ionosphere, which is a region of the atmosphere where you can bounce radio waves off, and basically just fire energy at it, punch it out, and affect communications. That's according to what you read on the website. And it's an array of antennae in Alaska, and there's actually a number of these facilities. I think there's about 10 or 15 around the world. They've got one at IceCat, and then somebody told me a few weeks ago, this is in Norway, IceCat, they've got one in Norway, they've got one in Australia. Where else was it somebody told me they've got one? It is a popular target of conspiracy theories, and though many have expressed fears of HAARP being used as a nefarious weapon, the scientists involved in aeronomy, space science or plasma physics reject these fears as unfounded. Well, basically I think a lot is claimed of HAARP which we don't have any evidence it can do that. But it is owned by the Department of Defence. They claim their experiments are related to communications. But some people say that it can affect the weather. It appears that they're putting a lot more energy into the atmosphere, like a billion watts rather than 2.5 megawatts. It said there was 2.5 megawatts. They said they were going to close it down a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, but they've reopened it.
It did close down temporarily for a change of staff.
Right, it could well have been that. So some have suggested, for example, there's a link between October 2009 Haiti quake and HAARP activity. I'm not convinced myself. I think it's too public. I think it's something else which is completely secret. I think it's convenient for all the people on the internet to blame HAARP because they could at some point just pull out all the evidence and show it wasn't there. They can debunk those statements fairly easily. And there's another HAARP at Poker Flats, or there was. Gary Vay, this is not a well-known story. He said that he was contacted by a whistleblower and they showed him people that were injured by the other HAARP facility because I think all the radiation had been directed more at the ground. And And he discussed that on a Red Ice Radio interview in 2011. I've got portions of that on my website. Nick Begich, he talks a lot about HAARP. Let's see, I've got this clip here.
We're in a conflict in Iraq, as an example, and we're there to win the hearts and minds and spread democracy. But that's not what the people apparently want. They want a theocracy, and if that's what they want in their own right to self-determination, maybe we need to recognize individual sovereignty as long as they keep it within the boundaries of their country and learn to leave people alone. We're the only country in the world with 800 bases and stations around the world to monitor and interfere with everyone else's politics. Maybe it's time to pull back a little bit towards our own borders, allow some governments to function. If they violate another state, if they violate the United States, I say stomp them into the Stone Age, as we did in Afghanistan. When we said give those guys up and they didn't do it, I think we were fully justified.
Wow. That's 2006 he said that. Nick Begich said he was fully justified in bombing Afghanistan. In 2006 he said that. Huh? We know. I mean, I'm sure just about everyone in this room knows Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. There were no terrorists hijacking planes. That's all a fantasy. This guy is meant to be intelligent. He's got a PhD. But he's coming out with crud like that on coast to coast. And I had the chance to meet him in November 2012, almost 2 years ago. And as you can see this on YouTube, you can hear me asking him the question. I quizzed him on this. Because the reason why I quizzed him was, going back to where did the towers go, but Begich sat through Dr. Judy Wood's presentation at the same conference I was at in November 2012. I wanted to know what his opinion on 9/11 was, just in case it happened not to have come across it. And if you listen to what he says, he basically says, yeah, I still think they should have bombed Afghanistan, after seeing Judy Wood's presentation. He sort of hedges his bets a little bit, but you go and listen to it. People came up to me after I asked him that question, it was right at the end, and they were like, their jaws were dropped. If you listen to what he says, and he says, many people would be shocked at my attitude to warfare. Damn right they would be, Nick. And you're supposed to be a peace, Nick. Yeah, and this is some of the Orgone stuff that I talked about. Some people say they can diffuse chemtrails by making a chembuster, which is using orgonite and some crystals. There's instructions for how to build one. I've pasted this on my website. I haven't built one myself. I just haven't, because it's meant to be possibly some negative side effects, but I think it's something that can be done. They're not particularly cheap to make, but if people want to go and check that out, they can. Now, talked about weather modification. Well, look at this. This is from Hurricane Ophelia, 16th of September 2005. I think, yeah, goes and plays again, it loops. What's these horizontal lines here? This is from I forget the exact website that this came from, but it's a weather website. I need to find the link for that because I haven't put it in here. Richard Hoagland talks about this. Now, what about this one? This is the plume of material from the World Trade Center on 9/11, the very day. This is what was a few hundred miles off the coast. It's got like in the shape of a pentacle, a five-sided shape. What's going on? Well, they didn't put it on the weather maps, even though it was there. If you look, I've got a video of the 4 of the mainstream news broadcasts for that morning. 2 of them mentioned the hurricane and 2 of them didn't even mention it. Only one of them mentioned it by name. That's what it would have looked like from space. Well, it's what it did look like, sorry.
A staple of space missions took on new poignancy in mid-September when Culbertson and his crewmates viewed the plumes of smoke rising from New York City shortly after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center.
As we went over Maine, we could see New York City and the smoke from the fires. Our prayers and thoughts go out to all the people there and everywhere else. Here I'm looking up and down the East Coast to see if I can see anything else. And to the people in Washington.
And Frank, that's an accurate assessment.
And I hope that the people responsible are caught and brought to justice as soon as possible. But first, our prayers and condolences to all involved. And I just wanted the folks to know that their city still looks very beautiful from space. I know it's very difficult for everybody in America right now. And I know folks are struggling very hard to deal with this and recover from it. But the country still looks good, and for New Yorkers, your city still looks great from up here.
As we went over Maine, we could see New York City and the smoke from the fires. I'm looking up and down the East Coast to see if I can see anything else. That's what he said on that audio clip. You mean to say he didn't see this? He didn't see that? He saw this, but he didn't see that? Huh? That was the guy in the space in the space station. But the path is what really did it when you see the path. This is the path of Hurricane Erin, 1st of September in the Atlantic. Travels across, hits Bermuda on the 7th of September 2001, does a bit of damage. And CNN said, oh, don't worry, it's going out to sea. Don't forget about it. Yeah, it went out to sea, almost in a straight line towards New York City. It was closest to New York City at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is not a theory, folks. Then it made a right-hand turn on the 12th and went out towards Newfoundland. You want to know why it did that? Well, you can do a bit more of your own research or read that book as to why. That will sort of give you the evidence and piece it together, and you can draw your own conclusion as to why it did that. If you want my answer, it's something to do with energy. And what they did at the World Trade Center involved electricity and magnetism. What are storm systems associated with? Well, a very strong electric field. And that electric field was detected at all 3 New York airports, which reported dry thunder on that day. That's the size. And also, it slowed down. It was travelling at its slowest during the events of 9/11. And it reached its maximum size on 9/11 as well. So you've got all these coincidences coinciding with the events of 9/11. Dane Wigington won't talk about it, yet he runs a website called Geoengineering Watch. Rosalind Peterson won't talk about it. She talks all about chemtrails. No one will talk about Hurricane Erin on 9/11, yet the data is clear. You can go and verify it for yourselves, but no one will talk about it. Sounds like a cover-up to me. All they'll talk about is chemical spraying and solar radiation management. That's why I think the spraying, the toxic spraying, is a thermite to what's in 9/11. Everyone thinks that thermite did 9/11, or destroyed the towers, I should say, to be more accurate. No, it's rubbish. It's rubbish. But yet the conspiracy 9/11 movement is convinced that thermite, nanothermite, or nukes was involved. No. Everyone talking about chemtrails is convinced it's toxic spraying. What if it's not that? What if what we're seeing is a side effect of the geoengineering technology, which I've shown you some evidence for, I think, already in operation? You can see magnetometer traces, which instruments in Alaska which measure the Earth's magnetic field. There is some coincidence with the events of 9/11 if you study this closely. It's all in Dr. Judy Wood's book. The most obvious one is at 8:46, where there was the biggest dip in the Earth's magnetic field. It started 20 minutes before. 8:46, World Trade Center number 1 gets its hole. It wasn't a plane crash. It was not a plane crash. Secretary of Defense William Cohen talks of weather control in 1997. Others, brackets terrorists, are engaging even in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes and volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror on other nations. It's real, and that's the reason we have to intensify our counter-terrorism efforts. Oh really? That was in 1997. Perhaps he was getting ahead in the script. Perhaps he was getting ahead in the script. Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025 was published in August 1996. Now this was meant to be like theoretical and, you know, just what we think might possibly be a way of doing things. You can go and read that, it's available. It's often touted as evidence that the military are doing weather modification. Well, it's not really, pardon me, evidence of that at all. It's evidence of perhaps predictive programming, getting people used to it. That's about it. Okay, so trying to draw some conclusions from what I've shown you. Weather modification, I think, has been in use for years, probably at least and since the late 80s, maybe even before, and I'm talking about clandestine weather modification, using technology which is way beyond anything which is talked about even now, even on the conspiracy scene, as it were. Disinformation is actively being put out. You can find more examples of what I've shown you tonight. There is evidence that the media have been trying to normalise the appearance of trails. I've shown you a little bit of that tonight. There is a bit more. It's possible, as I've said, that the whole idea of toxic spraying could be, I'm not hanging my hat totally on this, could be disinformation, promoted as a cover for the side effects we are seeing being the result of an energy-based geoengineering being done. Maybe even from space-borne technologies, and the promotion of toxic chemtrails is equivalent to the promotion of thermite or nukes having destroyed the World Trade Center on 9/11. It seems that many chemtrails may be appearing because of weather modification. That's what I think. The anomalous nature of the trails is officially denied. There's nothing going on. We're not going to get anything official out of Greenpeace. Anybody, the NGOs are all stitched up, just like the government departments. And if climatologists don't study the data that I've put together here, not just me, but hundreds of other people, then without embracing them, they are not giving you a true picture. So anybody who talks about global warming, any scientist in the world who talks about global warming and doesn't talk about what you're showing you tonight cannot be trusted. As far as I see it. They're either ignorant or they are part of the cover-up. They're either willfully putting out an incomplete picture or they're willfully part of the cover-up. So all this nonsense about global warming, carbon credits, it's all completely bogus, all of it. Because we already have the technology to solve the energy crisis. That was used on 9/11, not to solve anything, but to destroy the World Trade Center and create many more problems for all of us. So scientists who don't talk about what I've talked about here tonight will end up with the wrong conclusions. Right? It's as simple as that. And they'll run away from this evidence because they know what it represents. I mean, I've got a replica of the Star Child skull here tonight if anybody wants to come and look at that. I've got a similar experience where you present somebody with conclusive evidence that this is going on and they just run the opposite direction. They don't want to know because it's the end of their careers. So I think what I'm trying to do is disclose to you that this weather modification technology is real, it's in use. I think we've got clear evidence that it's being used regularly. And I think we've got to expose all of these things. That's why I've been doing what I've been doing for the last few years. The ET cover-up, cancer cover-up, the energy cover-up, the Apollo hoax, 9/11 hoax. It's all got to be exposed. But we've got another set of people, such as Dame Wigington, who runs Geoengineering Watch, who are also willingly part of the cover-up. They're actively putting out disinformation. You've also got to be aware of that just because somebody disagrees with the official story of global warming or the official story of 9/11 doesn't mean they're telling you the truth. They could also be putting out disinformation too. So you've got to be at least wary of that. And if they're talking about climate change and stuff or geoengineering and they don't talk about 9/11, I wouldn't take them seriously because I think that's the clearest evidence. So I've got more information about the tracker. If anybody, I've got a DVD about that, as I say. All the information's on my website, checktheevidence.com. I've got a couple of reports on there. This reinvestigating climate change, where I've compiled some of what I've told you tonight and some that I haven't. I've got 1 or 2 copies of that left. You can download that booklet free if you want. It's all on my website. Nobody's really responded to it. I've sent it to a few official people. No response. I sent it to one climatologist a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely no response. So please take leaflets, DVDs. Look at those websites. There are others as well. And that's basically it for tonight. I will try and answer questions if anybody's got them. But I'd like to thank you very much again for coming and for your attention. Thank you very much indeed.
Atlantic hydroacoustic array?
Not much. Tell me.
Can I put a picture up?
Yeah, switch the thing over by all means. Yeah, if you've got something to add to this, fantastic. He's just got some. Is this the Japanese cyclone, or I think this is what Dutch synths use, isn't it? Yeah, I've seen Dutch synths use some. Go on, show us this. Can you talk us through it?
This is a thermal imaging picture from a satellite. And if you just use the right arrow and go to the next image.
Oh yeah, Kuski.
Right. Okay, so if you just go back and forward between the two. This is an image from what's called hydroacoustic array in the South Atlantic. And the actual image is a satellite image of thermal energy going around the planet from a variety of satellites. And on a particular day, this pulse was picked up on the radar, and it's from an acoustic signal. And it's in the super terahertz band of audio frequencies, which you don't think to have audio in that sort of band. And there are some images out there on the internet. So if you look up the South Atlantic Diamond, you'll find this. It's actually powered from a small place just on the coast. And if you look on Google Earth, you'll see tracking, like tracks that have been dug into the terrain under the sea. Now, I know Google Earth and the information there isn't always reliable, but you can actually look at this image and find the diamond that's directly underneath the bottom point of it. The top end, which doesn't quite match there, actually ends up on Iceland, which happens to be one of the Americans have built a huge big dam reservoir there with a massive power station and a huge big aluminium smelting plant just to create a whole load of energy for something like this. So, there's a lot of things happening, and I think along with everything else to do with climate control, you can see this affected as well. So. Yeah,
thanks very much. Yeah, that's absolutely, I think that's absolutely another piece of evidence which is showing this is going on. And there are a number of these traces. As I say, Dutch Synths has got a few of these similar traces, and there's one that particularly I would have liked to have put in, but I didn't have time, was a Japanese cyclone, I think last year. And that you can see on this, it's a very similar trace to this, or similar looking with the same sort of colour scheme, and you can clearly see a pulse around the worst time of the storm, and it seems to swirl up the storm. So there's a number of instances that are picked up. A gentleman at the back there has got a question.
Chemtrail planes, where did they take off from? Where did they land?
That's a good question. Now, I would say from my observations, we do seem to have a number of flights which shouldn't be there. They're not really traceable. They appear to be involved in forming these grids. Now, whether those grids, we'll ignore the question whether those grids contain toxic chemicals or whether it's just ordinary contrails. The grids are still grids. It shouldn't be there. So where are these planes coming from that are forming these grids? My simple answer is I don't know. A chap that I was in touch with a few years ago called, oh crikey, I can't remember his first name. Oh God, what's his name? I can't remember his name. He's a Scottish guy. And he was down in the Pyrenees. I showed one of his pictures earlier on. And he basically tried to just, from observation, look at where these aircraft were coming from. And to cut a long story short, he suggested that some of the aircraft were coming out of the Azores, which I think is probably not unreasonable, because there is an airbase in the Azores, and it's sort of fairly well out of the way. There's not a lot of people are going to see what's going on there. So he thought that some of them at least were coming from the Azores. But they could be coming from any number of military bases. I just don't know. And somebody wrote to me and said they were coming out of RAF Mildenhall, is it? Or Millenhall? Mildenhall, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. Sorry? Mildenhall. Somebody said there's all these, if you go onto Google Earth, there's all these, you look at the satellite view, there's hundreds of planes on the ground or something. And he was claiming that. I mean, I can't really verify that in any way, but I'm just telling you what's been reported to me. I think it's much more complicated than most people on the internet are arguing, though. Gentleman, also near to the back.
Do you know what's happened to that Malaysian Airlines that went missing?
Well, that's a whole another story. I don't know what's happened. I think a couple of things I will say about that incident is the NSA will know where the aircraft went, and nobody from any of those agencies is talking. That, I think, is probably the most obvious thing that I could say. There is definitely a cover-up involved with that. There's no question about that. Some people have obviously claimed that it went to Diego Garcia, and there was a story about a guy having an iPhone in his pocket, and he allegedly took a black photograph because he managed to tap his iPhone, which was in his backside pocket, and it took a black picture, which then somebody claimed that it was from Diego Garcia because of the GPS data. That story I don't know, because the guy that was claiming that story, Jim Stone, I've known him to put out disinformation, and he claimed that you couldn't fake GPS data in a JPEG image. Well, I've got software at home which you can. It's called GeoSetter. So I knew that story was false the moment he put it out. So again, disinformation has been put out about that flight too. The other story about that is it was the same plane that crashed in the Ukraine. You know, and all those bodies that were found were actually the bodies of the original passengers. Is that true? I've no idea. I don't have any other supporting evidence. So all I can do is just scratch my head like most other people are doing. Gentleman in the hat at the back there. Yeah.
Just two things about chemtrails. One is I've seen lots of feathers, very, very low, lots of feathers type, you know what I mean? Like, obviously you've got the normal chemtrails, you know,
okay.
And then I've seen lots of feathers well below just the normal clouds, and obviously the normal clouds are moving and the feather shapes stay still. And the other thing on chemtrails are the two more theories that they're also seeing like metallize or acidified soil, so that GMO crops will grow.
Right.
And Project Bluebeam as well as kind of giant.
This is it. You hear all kinds of things. I will mention about the aluminium because there is some evidence that they've made GMO crops more resistant to aluminium. That's what I've read. Again, I haven't studied that in great depth, and of course some people have argued, yeah, if they're making it more resistant to aluminium, that means the aluminium is falling out of the sky. You know, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen. What I will say is that what I didn't realise until a couple of years ago, you do find aluminium compounds in the soil in certain types of clay. Aluminium is found in certain types of soils naturally. I don't know what levels it's found in, but it is already in some soils. Yeah. So it does occur naturally, and of course it must do because we get bauxite, which is aluminium ore, which is in high concentrations in certain areas, which is how we make the aluminium. So, and some of the aluminium contamination that comes into our bodies, how much of that comes from cookware or from aluminium cans that have fizzy drinks in, and so forth? We don't know. So you can't just automatically say it comes from chemtrails. You need to do some work to actually quantify that. And to my knowledge, that work hasn't properly been done. You know, gentlemen.
But they use aluminium to clean water.
Okay.
Drinking water.
All right.
If you're drinking ordinary drinking water, you're all drinking aluminium.
Right.
And it causes you to go demented. The floods at Linton and Lynmouth, they might be before your time, and most of you lot here. But
they did an experiment, didn't they? Yeah. Go on.
I think they used a camera to see the clouds, and it was far worse than their old expectations, and flooded out Linton and Lynmouth in Wales.
Yeah.
And the Russians used to see the clouds when they were having the May Day parade, see it themselves somewhere else, and then you get dry weather.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few instances of that. There's an instance of Paul McCartney talking about geoengineering in his concert. That's on the Don't Talk About the Weather film. And there's talk about geoengineering being used at the 2008 Olympics for either the opening or closing ceremony to make the weather. You know, some Chinese officials said they were going to modify the weather so that the parade went off all right. You know, it did. Yeah, allegedly. Yeah. Okay. Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, again, you need to make sure you source these images, because some of these sorts of images, you know. Right, yeah. If you've got that information, fantastic. But I've seen some images. Sorry? Yeah. Some of these images, people will Photoshop them and put them up, just to try and make a point. Gentleman with the blue thing raised.
Just a couple of things. I do a lot of fishing.
Okay.
And when you're out in the open, it's just land and sky.
Okay.
I sat there for 4 days. I don't believe there's that many planes doing it. So I've watched planes spray, stop.
Yes.
Spray, stop, turn, spray, stop, turn.
Oh, you've watched them turn?
Yeah.
This is one of the things, yeah, I've got a couple of videos of people that have seen them turn. And one of the...
You've just got land and sky, nothing else.
Yeah.
But I've also noticed that they seem to block the sun.
Yeah.
They chase the sun. They follow the sun. Wherever the sun goes, that's where they are.
Yeah. This is a problem. Are they deliberately putting spray in to do things, or are they somehow acting? I mean, Scott Stevens has suggested these planes are not actually spraying anything. They're just behaving as markers. In other words, they've been sent out just to fly there, and whatever effect has been created externally, that it's showing up in the appearance of the trails. So that's possibly another alternative, as I sort of said tonight. But yeah. But where you get all these shapes, you know, I've shown. What are they doing? But nobody will tell us. Yeah. I don't have the answer to that, unfortunately. You know, is it a military agency? Well, if it is, it's a well-hidden one. We haven't got any whistleblowers. All these whistleblowers that you hear on the internet, they'll just tell you exactly what I've told you. They won't tell you any, they won't give you any names, they won't give you any names of places. You know, they won't say, right, they're using this type of aircraft, they're taking off from here on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, and they're going here, here and here. This is the program. You won't find anyone giving you that information.
Are you on Facebook?
Yes.
Check a guy out called Chris Bowling. Why did he say that it was taken into an Air Force police for 8 hours, blah, blah, blah?
Is he? Right. He didn't go by a pseudonym called Dr. Hemp, did he?
Yeah.
I thought it was him. I couldn't remember. So thanks for confirming that.
There's another weird weather formation for you.
Yeah.
Last question, though. Go on.
Yeah. I mean, what is going on? I think the only explanation is some form of energy is being put into the atmosphere for these weather anomalies. Whether I'm right in the chemtrails or the side effect of that, I don't know. I could be wrong about that. That's just my sense at the moment. And it doesn't explain all these weird grids and circles. Is that just to mess with people's minds? Seems like an awful lot of trouble to go to, but we know that they're real. You know, I get sent photographs every few days, every week.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much everyone again. Thank you.